Hello and welcome to Have You Heard with Heather Darling. I'm Heather Darling and today's show will feature Sheriff David Clarke, former Sheriff of Milwaukee County. Sheriff Clarke holds a bachelor's in criminal justice management from Concordia University, where he graduated summa cum laude, and a master's in domestic security from the U.S. Naval Academy Center for Homeland Defense and Security. He brings to today's show 40 years of law enforcement service, 24 years with the City of Milwaukee Police Department, where he rose to a command level officer position, and the next 15 years as Sheriff of Milwaukee County, being elected 4 times by the people. Sheriff Clarke is now the president of a statewide organization called Rise Up Wisconsin. Welcome, Sheriff.
My pleasure to be on with you.
So you are an elected representative serving the people, and people have since called for you to run for other elected office, but you're out holding rallies and serving the people rather than elected office. Clearly the choice is yours. So what made you decide to serve the people in this capacity?
Well, after you indicated nearly 40 years in law enforcement, it was time to do something else, time to move on in life. And, when you do that, you got to have a plan, and you better do something. And so I thought, I was in the spotlight for a long period of time, reaching a national profile. And then I thought, it's probably a better role for me right now to be a foot soldier. So taking a less of a high profile image, and I'm working at base level with conservative minded voters, trying to influence state government here in the state of Wisconsin. And that's why I formed that nonprofit, Rise Up Wisconsin. I need people to go to riseupwisconsin.com, take a look at the website, donate, and get involved in your own state level.
I'm sure the people of Wisconsin are happy to have you there, and I'm sure the people of America will be happy to feel the effects that will be coming from that. So right now we're looking at a international crisis unfolding in Afghanistan. In your opinion, why don't we see Joe Biden pushing back on the Taliban here?
Because he's not exercising leadership. Look, this was a crisis of Joe Biden's making. It's just like the same situation at the border. It's just like what our energy crisis right now, where gas prices are through the roof because he shut down the Keystone Pipeline. So he creates these crisis moments because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just pushing buttons and says, well, let's see what happens if I push this button here. And then it explodes, and then he gets out there and says, oh, nothing to worry here, nothing to see here. This is somebody else's fault. But now he triggered a refugee crisis that's going to have implications here in America, as some of the Afghan refugees are going to be brought here. But I've done enough in the area of crisis management, done a lot of reading from people who are well versed in crisis management. Crisis management 101, rule number 1, don't make a bad situation worse. Look, some of these things were already, bad situations. Sure, he inherited Afghanistan, no doubt about that, but so did 2 presidents before him, and they didn't trigger this. There was a more orderly way to exit that theater of operations, and he didn't take it. He pulled the troops out first. He left Americans behind. He left Afghan supporters of the American movement, left them behind, created this crisis. And now everybody's scrambling around trying to figure out what to do. The other thing in crisis management, rule number 2, don't let somebody else's problem become your problem, which is why I think it's a bad idea for states within the United States, but specifically here in Wisconsin, because Fort McCoy was mentioned as a place to drop these refugees. It's not our problem. The best thing to do with a refugee problem is locate individuals close to their country they're fleeing. You bring them to the United States. There's a huge cultural difference. There's a language barrier. I heard one of the spokespersons for the Fort McCoy here in Wisconsin said we're notifying area schools that they may be getting some Afghan children they're going to have to educate. And I thought, wait a minute. School budgets are already in place. They haven't budgeted for this. And there isn't a K-12 school in Wisconsin that has a bilingual English and Arabic programs. So this is what I mean when I say there's no leadership here. He creates a crisis, and then he leaves his underlings to scramble.
Sheriff, let me ask you this. Do you believe that there will be a nexus between the defund the police movement, the southern border crisis, and the Afghan crisis? And if so, what will the impact be on the American people from that?
Well, it creates these pressure points in areas that people are not prepared for. One of them is money. That's the big thing. The other is safety. You have, the issue at the border, the southern border. I mean, there's three reasons why you have to control your immigration. First of all, you have to have borders. Otherwise, you're not a country. But the reason why you have to have borders is because you have to protect against certain things. One of the things is you want to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. So for him to have done this during a pandemic is, quite frankly, insane. One of the other reasons you need to protect your border is because there are domestic insecurity issues. You see criminals, you see MS-13, you see drug trafficking, sex trafficking coming across the southern border. And you want to be able to control that and keep it under control and keep it out of here. And, the third reason, and this one kind of gets people on the left anyway, a little rankled, is you want to control, because you have to, the influx of another country's ne'er-do-wells. Look, that puts pressure on our school systems. It puts pressure on our public safety. It puts pressure on healthcare, all of these things. People coming over with no skills, nothing to offer employers, in a market that, right now can't handle these things. So this is why forethought, Heather, forethought has to go into any of these situations before you start pushing buttons, but you're not going to get that out of Joe Biden.
Sheriff, domestically violent crime in major cities has skyrocketed. Speaking of the left, it's mostly cities that are run by Democrats. What do you see as the driver for that violence, and what is the impact of defunding the police on the communities?
Yeah, this whole war on cops that started in earnest after Ferguson, Missouri, and that was about 5, 6, 7 years ago now, but I knew it would have a ripple effect. I said it at the time. I said this would have long-term consequences in public safety here in the United States with this war on cops. The thing is, some of these ideas that are coming out of this, and the reason why it's happening, Heather, you probably know this, every time there's a great crime decline, the criminal coddlers start implementing their philosophies into the criminal justice system, and we took our foot off the gas. We had crime on the run. We had historic record lows of crime all across the spectrum. Your Part 1 crimes, your serious felonies, so on and so forth. In every major city in America during the 90s and the early 2000s, all right? We got serious about crime. We started locking people up, serious career criminals. We started locking them up for the longest period of time allowable by law. Ironically, it was Joe Biden, who was in the Senate, who authored the Bill Clinton crime control bill, all right, in the mid 90s. And so if all we had to do was keep doing that, and we still would have been experiencing those record lows. But no, we let the criminal coddlers come in. We let them influence criminal justice policies. The next thing you know, they think that if you're just nice to these people, they'll change their way. It doesn't work. It never has. This is not new. What they're proposing now, they just renamed it. Decarceration, for instance, eliminating bail. All that stuff's been tried before. Post-World War II, every time the criminal coddlers have been in control of these policies, crime has skyrocketed. And then, of course, more sensible policies like punishment. Punishment plays a significant role in criminal justice. The left eliminates punishment. When you want a certain behavior, you reward it. When you don't want a certain behavior, you punish it. We don't want serious crime. We have to punish crime. Instead, the foolish policies are that they reward criminals with a second chance, job training program, all these things that just fly in the face of who these people really are. They don't want to work. Okay, they've had second, third, fourth, fifth. They're long criminal histories. None of that stuff works, but then all of a sudden we move to the side. We, like the tough on crime crowd, we say, well, crime's down. Why don't we let them try a few of these things? Very dangerous policies.
And Sheriff, it's interesting that you say that because while we talk about these criminals as victims in this day and age, you brought up to me the other day the point, what about the victims? Why are we giving the criminals more rights than the victims that these criminals have taken advantage of and harmed? And it's really disgusting to see. On another note, you frequently criticize Republican lawmakers for their failure to act in accordance or uphold the will of the people. What do you think it'll take to change that, and what would you like to see from lawmakers in D.C.?
Well, first of all, less of a reliance on these government officials, these elected officials, because they don't carry out the will of the people. They carry out what's in their best interest, what's going to get them reelected, the people that donate to their campaigns, the big donors. That's who they cater to. So, what do you have to do to change that? Well, first of all, you got to get these people off the bus. Here's how this works. You get the wrong people off the bus, you get the right people on the bus, you get the right people in the right seats, and then you move the bus in the direction you want it to go. If you have the wrong people on the bus, it's going to go in the wrong direction. So it might take a couple of election cycles to get rid of these individuals, but that's what's going to have to be done. The other thing that people can do at base level, meaning the voter level, is to keep the pressure on. That's, again, what Rise Up Wisconsin is about. Keeps the pressure on. It organizes grassroots individuals. Elected officials hate organized movements. Why? Because they bring heat.
Sheriff, we have to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, I would like to go further into Rise Up Wisconsin and hear more about that.
Today's show is sponsored by BCAT, aligning people with their purpose. The Brand and Culture Alignment Toolkit was designed to bring teams into alignment around their collective purpose and inspire each member to become the best version of themselves in support of the people and communities they serve. Our science-based solution consists of instruments that measure and map and collective perception of your organization's North Star and practical methods that help each member embrace and align with it.
Sheriff, when we took a commercial break, we said we were going to come back to Rise Up Wisconsin. And I know this is a movement that you've put a lot of effort into. You've worked with other people. You reviewed other things that were going on around the county and came up with a great sort of combination of things that have worked. So did Rise Up Wisconsin stem from the election of 2020, former lockdowns, mask mandates, vax mandates, these vax passports, other intrusions on American civil liberties, or something else? What was the genesis of this movement?
All of the above. All of the above was taking place at and affecting the grassroots voter, the individual, at ground level. And there was a lot of complaining about it. I'm at ground level. I keep my finger on the pulse of the people at ground level, and I was hearing from them. And I'm hearing some recurring themes over and over and over again. And one of them is that people were tired of, and this is not anything new, They were tired of this footprint of big government into their lives. The reaction to the pandemic, totally unnecessary, destroyed businesses, destroyed people's lives, suicides went up, opioid overdoses went up. The result of those policies was worse than the disease. That was just one aspect. Coming out of 2020, look, that left a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths. What happened, and not just the result, okay? Because you can't get upset just because your candidate loses. Excuse me, but when you don't feel, and this is what they were telling me, Heather, they didn't feel that this election in 2020 was fair and honest. They didn't think it was secure, and so people had lost faith in our voting system, and that's important because when people don't trust the system, they're going to bail out. I mean, it's kind of like, I like to use the analogy of if you went to a casino and you're plugging a slot machine and you find out, or you get an inkling that the machine is rigged, you're not going to sit there and just keep plugging your money. You're going to bail out of there and go somewhere else. So we can't have people do that. On either side of the spectrum, we can't have people do that. So it was that, it was a number of things, but basically what I noticed was there was no organized effort. There are a lot of good groups out there, conservative groups at ground level, but they're not real organized. And you have to be, if a political movement is not organized, it's not going to be very successful. So I didn't want to just take and throw up a thing on Facebook, Facebook page of Rise Up Wisconsin. I took the time, because this is the way I operate. I take the time to do it right, so the thing has a chance to succeed. And I went the nonprofit route. So I had to file for a 501c4. It's a very lengthy process. It costs a lot of money. You got to pay lawyers. You have to organize a board of directors, articles of organization. And it took me 6 months to do that. I could have done a Facebook page of Rise Up Wisconsin in 24 hours, but I thought that's not going to be very successful. So we're organizing at grassroots level right now because, like I said, organized movements are what politicians fear on both sides. So but the thing is, I have to, remind people this stuff costs money. There's overhead. I have to pay a monthly lease for office space. I have other operating expenses. I got legal fees. We have website developers, so on and so forth. And I have funded it up till now because I thought it was that important. I said, well, David, if you want this, why don't you get it started? I put my money where my mouth is, but I'm not independently wealthy. And so I can't continue to fund this thing by myself. This was built for the people. It wasn't built for me. I don't need this. And if it's going to sustain itself, and one of the things big things we're pushing right now, in and above an agenda for Wisconsin, are things that are important to people, not important to politicians, things like term limits. We want to push an expansion of gun rights here in the state, but we want a full cyber forensic audit of the 2020 election in Wisconsin, because there were a lot of irregularities that still have not been resolved. And the voters want those irregularities resolved, and they want it done before 2022. So if we don't have that, and, ironically, the GOP controls both chambers of the legislature, the Assembly and the Senate. And it's the leaders of those two chambers, GOP, that are really resisting this audit. Wisconsin's a swing state. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, for instance, those are swing states that, Ohio and Florida, if you're going to win an election, you got to win the majority of those. Donald Trump lost Pennsylvania by a slim margin, Michigan by a slim margin, and Wisconsin by about 20,000 votes out of 3.3 million cast. So, we need to do this just to regain support and so people have confidence in our electoral process.
Sheriff, in your estimation, what is the level of confidence of the American people in today's election system? And in addition to that, can you actually have confidence in an entirely vote-by-mail campaign? And if so, how?
Well, that's an excellent question. First of all, limited government. We don't want government in every aspect of our lives. And as I indicated in the beginning of the program, government's footprint on the American voter, the American individuals, life is looming large, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that leads to more spending. More spending leads to more regulation. More regulation leads to more control over people's lives. People just want to be left alone. They want basic services from government. For instance, from the federal government. Protect our borders. Keep us safe from foreign threats. There are some other things that government should be doing, but government should not have a Department of Education. They should not have a Department of Labor. They shouldn't have a lot of these bureaucracies that just lead to control over people and high costs. So limited government, less spending, and adherence to the Constitution and rule of law. We don't hardly do those things anymore. You know, we're not the republic that we used to be. We're something, but I don't know what it is right now.
For sure. And while our country's burning, while we have a war in Afghanistan, we're watching Chuck Schumer dancing in the streets with Stephen Colbert, Nancy Pelosi having an unmasked party where she's filling her coffers, and at the same time, they're mandating edicts to the American people. Let me switch really quick gears here and ask you a little bit about January 6th, the events in Washington, D.C. So why do you think the federal government is working so hard to identify the people that were involved around the Capitol on January 6th?
Twofold here. One is to keep the pressure on President Trump to prevent him from running again, to smear him with was nothing more than a frat party that got out of hand. Sure, trespassing, okay, but then again, they call it the people's house, but then when they go inside, all of a sudden they're trespassing. I find that ironic. And I think the other reason is government's a little bit afraid that they just got a taste of what a real uprising might look like. That was not an uprising. That's why I refer to it as a frat party out of hand. Excuse me. But these government officials, these rulers, they're not public servants. They don't act like it. They act like public rulers, the elite, the arrogant. You know, life's pretty good for them. But they got a glimpse that if there was a groundswell of support to reclaim this country, wouldn't turn out well for them. So they're trying to put fear in the American people that if you do this, if you talk about it, if you even try organizing, you know, we're going to come down on you. So it's basically, it has a chilling effect. And I think that it's intimidation is what it is, because that was much ado about nothing.
How do you compare and contrast the January 6th events where people are being held in jail without attorneys, without opportunity for bail, to these so-called peaceful protests in Seattle and Portland and other places where what amounts to teenagers were permitted to walk in, take over police stations, and where mobs literally toppled statues in some sort of effort to erase history, and they were out the same day if they were ever incarcerated. How do you compare and contrast these two things?
You can't really. I mean, you know, let's look at this. The individuals who are trespassing into the U.S. Capitol. And I still maintain, if it's the people's house, you can't trespass in your own house. You know, that not one individual of all the, I think there are like 500 people that have been identified or arrested, so on and so forth. Not one has been charged with a serious felony. They're all low-level misdemeanors, trespassing, for instance. The same sort of things that the criminal coddlers say, well, you know, it's not a violent crime, we shouldn't be locking people up. If you did this is untenable. If you did this to a criminal, a hardened criminal, held him in solitary confinement forever, not letting him have access to evidence, no bail for a misdemeanor? Are you kidding me? The fact that America isn't up in arms about that, and it disappoints me about my fellow Americans, that we just do a shoulder shrug. We go, oh yeah, that's terrible. Well, no, it's worse than terrible, because they could do it to you next. So you look at that, and you know, look at the riots. You had fire bombings of government buildings. You had fire bombings and looting of personal businesses. You had law enforcement officers shot at, killed during these riots. You had Kamala Harris set up a fund to bail these people out of jail. On top of that, these politically active prosecutors will not charge these individuals. They don't hold them on bail anyway, turn them right back onto the street to get back into the fray. I mean, this is like, you couldn't write a novel, a fiction novel based on this and have anybody believe it, but here it is, we're dealing with it.
So, Sheriff, we're almost at the end of our program, and I warned you that I was going to ask you this question, and here it is. I was watching some footage from a recent rally from Rise Up Wisconsin, and I saw someone hand you a T-shirt, and it said Governor David Clarke 2022. So is that a possibility?
If you believe in the fact that anything's possible, I guess you could say that, but it's not on my radar screen right now. You know, I don't want to make this about me. I'm flattered by that. You know what it's about? People are yearning for leadership, and I provide it. Whether you like my kind of leadership or not, it's still leadership, and people are yearning for that. But I don't want to make this about me. I had my time in the spotlight. I want to be a foot soldier now and help other people. I want to help organize this movement. That's what I have my sights set on. I left public office on my own, by the way. Retired. I didn't get defeated in an election. But it's time to do something else, and I'm more effective in this foot soldier role then. But I never say never, so we'll see.
Sheriff, I'm sure that the people of Wisconsin are happy to know that you're still out there working for them in some capacity. And I'm thrilled that you took the time to be on my show today. I greatly appreciate all the information that you've given to our viewers, and I hope that you'll come back and join us again sometime. Thank you.
Anytime. Be well.